A couple of weeks ago, my dad came home with what he called a small job offer. One of his coworkers was heading out of town for a few days and needed someone he could trust to keep an eye on his house. My dad figured I was perfect for it, not just because I'm his kid, but because the man's house was rigged with a massive CCTV setup. Cameras in every single room, all streaming back to an upstairs monitoring station with a wall-sized screen, the kind that makes you feel like you're sitting in a security control room. And since I'm a computer science major, my dad always assumes I can handle anything with wires and blinking lights. The man told my dad he'd pay me $200 for 2 days just to watch the house. Whatever that meant exactly, I didn't really care. $200 was $200. My dad drove me over there and introduced me to the guy. His name doesn't really matter now. And the man seemed almost insistent that I stay up in the monitoring room instead of wandering around the house all day. I remember the way he said it, kind of stiff, like he was choosing his words carefully. That was fine with me, though. So when I wasn't grabbing something to eat, I was mostly parked in that upstairs room, the glow of the monitors lighting up the walls around me, the steady hum of electronics filling the air. I had the TV on in the background just to keep the silence from swallowing me whole, and I spent most of the time tapping away on my laptop, trying to catch up on some schoolwork. Ironically, the one thing I wasn't really doing was keeping an eye on the monitors. Night came, and I found myself staring out the dark window, realizing I had no idea where in the house I was supposed to sleep. It was weird, we hadn't discussed that at all, and now the empty house felt even bigger around me, every corner swallowed in shadows. So I sat back down at the monitoring desk, the screens flickering softly in the dim room, and started flipping through the camera feeds, checking which rooms had beds or at least a couch I could crash on. That's when I noticed something that made the back of my neck tighten. The camera feed showing the downstairs patio caught my eye. The back screen door was wide open. I didn't remember it being open. In fact, I was almost certain it hadn't been. My pulse picked up as I started cycling through every camera, one after another, scanning each grainy feed with rising panic. And then, on the living room camera, I saw something else. The closet door was cracked open, just enough to see the black gap behind it. That door had definitely been closed earlier. I knew it had been. My breathing turned shallow as I quickly grabbed my phone and texted my dad, telling him to call the man and check if he had come back home for something. While I waited, my eyes stayed glued to the monitor, every pixel on the dark screen crawling under my skin. Then it happened. From the pitch-black slit of the closet, a tall figure stepped out. More of a shape than a person, just a long black shadow gliding into the room. I felt the blood drain from my face as I yanked my arms off the desk, instinctively covering my mouth with both hands to keep from making a sound. But as I did that, my left elbow clipped something heavy on the edge of the desk, knocking it to the floor with a loud, echoing thud that cut through the silence like a gunshot. I froze, eyes wide, staring back at the screen. On the monitor, I watched as the shadowed figure's head jerked upward, turning as if it could hear the exact place I was sitting. Then it started moving toward the stairs, slowly, painfully slowly, taking one deliberate step at a time, coming up, closer, closer. Meanwhile, my phone buzzed in my hand, a small vibration that felt like thunder in the silent room. It was a text from my dad. "No, he's not. I just spoke to him half an hour ago. Why?" I stared at the words, my stomach twisting, every muscle in my body tightening as if the air had turned to ice. My mind scrambled for what to say, for what to do, and I got so caught up, frantically texting my dad to send help now, that I didn't even notice what was happening on the monitors. That's when I heard it. A knock at the door. It was soft, almost polite, but in the heavy, tense silence of that room, it was the loudest sound I had ever heard. My head snapped up, eyes darting between the door and the glowing screens. My breath caught when I saw it. The first camera feed I looked at showed the shadowy figure standing just outside the door to the room I was in, the figure's vague outline swaying slightly, as if listening. And that's when I remembered. That door didn't have a lock. A cold wave of panic washed over me, and the only thought I could grab onto was, "Get out!" I didn't even think. I just turned and threw the window open, the hinges creaking in protest, and jumped out, crashing into the bushes below with a thud that knocked the air from my lungs. I didn't look back. I just ran, barefoot, adrenaline screaming in my veins, the cold night air biting at my skin as I tore down the block. I finally stopped, gasping for breath, when my phone rang. It was my dad, his voice tight with worry as I answered. He told me he had called his friend and asked if there was anyone who might have a key or any reason to be in the house. The man's response made my blood run cold. He had no relatives, no friends who had keys, no one who would ever let themselves into his home. So he called the cops. They came and pulled the footage, taking the hard drives for review. I got to watch all of it later, every second of that horrifying night replaying in grainy black and white images on the screen. It showed the exact moment the intruder broke the glass on the backyard door and slipped inside. A dark shape moving from room to room, pausing in doorways, standing so still it was almost like the cameras glitched. It showed the moment I leapt out the window, disappearing into the bushes, and the intruder standing there in the room I had just fled, turning to look out the window as if he could still see me. And then, a few minutes later, the figure turned and ran, vanishing into the darkness of the house. They never found him. The footage was just too dark to see his face. One day, I agreed to house sit for a friend, just for the night. He and his family were going on a short vacation and needed someone to watch their pets and keep an eye on the place. I said yes for a bit of extra cash. I'd been to his house plenty of times before, so I already knew the layout. The narrow hallways, the creaky floor near the kitchen, the way the air always smelled faintly of cedar and something warm. Nothing eventful happened the entire day. I fed the 2 cats, sprinkled food into the fish tank, and refilled the bird feeder. The hours drifted by in quiet, and the house felt peaceful, almost comforting. When it was time to sleep, I chose to crash on the couch in the sunroom. It was easily my favorite spot in their house, a small, cozy room wrapped in windows on 3 sides, with a big TV mounted on the wall. At night, it always felt like floating inside a glass bubble, separated from the world by nothing but thin glass. I fell asleep with the TV flickering softly, its glow washing over the darkened yard outside. But I woke up not long after when I turned the TV off. Now, the room was dark, and the world outside those windows was nothing but empty blackness. I tried to drift back to sleep, pulling the blanket tighter around me. But then I heard it, a faint metallic clink, like the PVC gate outside closing. I told myself it was probably just the wind, brushing it off as I tried to steady my breathing. But the room, surrounded by windows in every direction, made me feel exposed, like I was sitting in a glass box under watch. I stood up, peering out into the darkness, eyes straining to see past the reflections of the room. Everything was still, but the silence felt heavy, pressing against the windows. I sat back down on the couch, telling myself to calm down, but that's when I heard it, a soft crunch of leaves just outside, slow and deliberate, like someone shifting their weight on the grass. That was when I knew someone was out there. My heart started pounding, and I forced myself to look again, scanning the darkness just beyond the glass. And that's when I saw it. There was someone pressed up against the window, directly behind the couch, so close their breath might have fogged the glass. They were looking in, their face barely visible, just a pale shape against the dark, features impossible to read. I couldn't tell if they could see me in the dim light or not, but they were there, watching. And I was trapped inside, with only the glass between us. I yelled as loud as I could, my voice cracking with adrenaline, telling them to fuck off. I'm not a big guy, and whoever this person was, they looked bigger, tall and broad even in the dark, their outline almost filling the window. There was no way I was going out there to confront them. Shockingly, it didn't scare them away. Instead, they turned and walked slowly toward the back door, their shadows stretching across the grass under the moonlight. I could see the faint movement through the side windows as they reached for the doorknob and started to twist it, testing it, jiggling it, like they were checking just how easy it would be to slip inside. A cold rush of panic surged through me. I tore myself away from the window and ran to grab the phone, nearly dropping it with how badly my hands were shaking. My voice was hoarse when I shouted back toward the sunroom, "I'm calling the police!" That, thankfully, worked. I heard the footsteps outside quicken, moving away across the yard, fading into the dark. I stood there, frozen, clutching the phone to my chest, listening, waiting to see if they would come back. But I didn't actually call the cops. Instead, I texted my friend, telling him what had happened, that someone had almost broken in, but I managed to scare them off. I didn't go back down to the sunroom. Instead, I went upstairs, locking myself inside one of the bedrooms, listening for any sound outside the windows, every creak of the old house making me flinch as I lay on the bed, wide awake, waiting for dawn. Somehow, I managed to drift off eventually, and when morning came, the house felt normal again, filled with the quiet chirping of the birds I had fed the day before. When my friend's family came back, they found something that made the air feel cold all over again. Every single tire on the sedan they had left parked in the driveway was slashed, deep gashes cutting through the rubber, the car sitting awkwardly low on its rims. We all tried to make sense of it, piecing together what might have happened. We speculated that it could have been someone who had a problem with their family, someone who knew about their vacation plans, someone who had a bigger plan to break in that night, and when it didn't work out, settled for something else. But honestly, that's just speculation. Still, it's the least terrifying explanation I can hold on to. When I was in college, I picked up babysitting gigs on the side to make a little extra cash. It wasn't much, but it helped, and it was easy enough work. One day, while I was killing time in the campus library, I spotted an ad on the bulletin board. Someone was looking for a house sitter for the weekend, with a phone number listed to call if interested. House-sitting sounded even better than babysitting. Same easy money, but without the part where you had to entertain kids and clean up spills every 5 minutes. So as soon as I got back to my place, I called the number. A guy named Chuck picked up. His voice was calm, casual, and after a short conversation, we arranged for me to come by that Friday so he could show me around before they left. When I arrived, Chuck met me at the door, and he seemed friendly enough, the kind of person who smiled a lot but didn't say much if he didn't need to. He gave me a quick tour of the place while his wife moved around the house, gathering last-minute things for their trip. The house was huge, like really huge. It had that quiet, echoey feel of a place that was too big for 2 people to live in, with high ceilings and long hallways that smelled faintly of old wood and cleaning products. Chuck showed me the kitchen, the living room, a den with dark leather furniture, and then upstairs to where I would be sleeping. They had me in one of the spare bedrooms. I say one of because there were several, all lined up along the upstairs hallway, each with a closed door. The room they gave me had a small bed, a dresser, and a window that looked out over the backyard. It felt clean and comfortable, but there was something about how many empty rooms were around me that felt strange, even if I couldn't quite put my finger on why. Chuck and his wife eventually headed out, waving goodbye from the driveway before driving off into the dusk, leaving me alone in that massive, quiet house. Nothing out of the ordinary happened for the entire day. I wandered around, checking the locks, getting familiar with where everything was. I made myself something simple for dinner, and then I just existed in the quiet, the ticking of the big clock in the hallway filling the silence. It was uneventful, honestly, and as the evening settled in, I started to feel like I was missing out. It was a Friday night, after all, and my friends were probably out, laughing over drinks or killing time at some party while I was stuck sitting in someone else's house, listening to the hum of the refrigerator. But I kept reminding myself why I was there, and why it was worth it. $200 for the whole weekend? Later that night, I was stretched out on the guest bed I'd be sleeping in, the soft glow of the TV flickering across the room as I watched a movie on demand, trying to relax. My mind wandered as I stared at the screen, drifting in and out of the plot. I couldn't help but wonder why Chuck and his wife felt the need to hire someone just to watch their house for the weekend. There weren't any pets to feed, no plants that needed watering, nothing that really required someone to be there. It was a very nice house, though, the kind of place that practically whispered money in every corner, so I figured they just wanted a sense of security while they were gone. Someone to be there, making sure the house wasn't sitting empty in case someone with bad intentions was watching. By the time I turned off the TV, my eyes were heavy, and I could feel sleep dragging me down fast. I was exhausted, probably just minutes away from passing out completely, my head sinking deeper into the pillow. That's when I heard it. A soft, barely there click in the silence, so faint that I almost convinced myself I imagined it. But then, a sudden glow bloomed in the darkness, breaking across the room like a knife slicing into the black. It jolted me fully awake. I blinked, disoriented, and then I saw it. The thin line of light creeping out from under the crack of a door. It took me a moment to process what I was seeing, my sleepy brain catching up slowly. But when it did, I felt my heart drop into my stomach. It was the closet door. My breath caught as I flipped onto my side, my heart slamming against my ribs so fast it felt like it was vibrating through my entire body. I pulled the sheets up to my chin, gripping the fabric so tightly my knuckles hurt, and I forced myself to keep my eyes shut, pretending to be asleep. Every second felt like it stretched forever. I was certain there was someone in that closet, that they were standing there, just on the other side of that thin wooden door, maybe watching me, maybe waiting for me to move, to breathe too loudly, to get up. But I couldn't do it. I was too afraid to move, too afraid to make a sound, too afraid to know for sure. Words can't describe the fear that washed over me in that bed. It was the kind that made every hair on my body stand on end, the kind that made the darkness feel alive around me, the kind that made the silence heavy enough to crush me. And with each passing minute, as I lay there, frozen under the covers, it felt more and more certain that I might not make it out of that room alive. The closet door opened. I couldn't see it. I was facing the opposite direction, my back toward the closet, my eyes clamped shut. But I heard it, the soft creak of the hinges stretching out in the darkness, the faintest scrape as it moved across the carpet. I squeezed my eyes tighter and forced myself to stay perfectly still, every muscle in my body screaming to move, to run, but I didn't dare. My breathing was shallow, trembling in my chest as I tried to melt into the mattress. Then came another click, a bit louder this time, sharp in the suffocating silence. The glow vanished, leaving the room in darkness again, and I heard the door quietly shutting, the latch clicking into place. But nothing else. No footsteps, no rustling, nothing. And that was somehow worse, because that meant whoever it was had gone back into the closet. I didn't know what to do. They had to have seen me lying there, had to know I was awake. But the idea of making a run for it felt impossible. The fear of being chased, of feeling hands grab me from behind, was too much to even consider. The room was dead silent, so quiet that I could hear the thudding of my heartbeat in my ears, each pulse like a drumbeat, counting down to something I couldn't see. I lay there, thinking, waiting, until I couldn't take it anymore. I decided to peek, just to see if the coast was clear, just to see if I was imagining everything, just to know. I flipped over, slowly, careful not to make a sound. And there, standing right next to the bed, was someone. Their outline was barely visible in the darkness, but I could see enough to know they were there, close enough to touch, their hand reaching toward me, slowly, like they were trying to grab me or check if I was really awake. My breath caught in my throat, and instinct took over. I pulled my arms up, curling them against my chest as I backed up, pressing myself against the wall in shock, eyes locked on the figure in front of me. They didn't move. They didn't speak. They just stood there, hand still out, as if frozen. That was all I needed. I leapt over the metal bar at the end of the bed, landing hard on the floor, and sprinted for the door, throwing it open so hard it smacked against the wall. I flew down the stairs, taking them two at a time, not daring to look back, the house echoing with the pounding of my feet. I didn't stop until I was out the front door, slamming it behind me, and I just ran. I ran all the way home, not caring who saw me, not caring that I had left everything behind. I let myself into my place, locked the door, and grabbed my phone with shaking hands. I called Chuck, breathless, my voice shaking as I told him what happened. I told him there was someone in the house, someone in the room, that it was his problem now. And then I hung up. He tried to call back again and again, but I didn't answer. I didn't want to hear whatever explanation he might have had, whether it was some family member they forgot to mention, or that they had frequent break-ins, or that this was just something they dealt with often. I didn't care. I didn't even care about the money anymore. I just knew I never wanted to speak to Chuck again, and I never wanted to see that house or that room ever again.